Hello everyone, and welcome to week 10. This week we're going to talk about how to use sources effectively in your final paper, and we're going to learn about logical fallacies, what they are, and how to avoid them in your writing. So your first reading for this week is a link to another Lumen Learning page. This one's kind of interesting. There's about 5 pages here that I'd like you to look through, starting with this one which explains what fallacies are. Then go on to the next page that talks about formal fallacies. It gives an explanation of what formal fallacies are, what each one is, and then an example. After that, I'd like you to read through the following page, which discusses informal fallacies. And as you can see, there's a lot of them. Again, same idea here. It talks about what the fallacy is and then gives you an example. The next page is going to be a review of what you've read, some activities and review questions if you'd like a little bit more practice, or if you're not quite sure you completely understand fallacies. And then the final page I'd like you to look through is just this glossary. So it basically defines all of the fallacies that you've read about in a nice sort of summary. Your second reading is lecture notes from a friend of mine who has taught philosophy, logic, humanities, ethics, all those complicated courses for about 20 years. And these are his lecture notes on informal fallacies. Now keep in mind his lecture notes don't cover formal fallacies, but as I'm sure you noticed in the Lumen Learning reading, there are a lot more kinds of informal fallacies. So same idea here, talks about what the fallacy is and then goes on to give you some examples. Okay, so please make sure you read through that. Once you've read through the readings, and it is absolutely crucial this week that you do all of the reading. You will not be able to complete this week's assignment without doing the reading. You're going to go into the logical fallacy assignment. And the logical fallacies assignment sheet gives you some background about what logical fallacies are, why we want to avoid them, and then tells you exactly what you're going to do this week. It's important to know that logical fallacies can weaken rhetorical arguments and can damage credibility. So in a paper like your final paper, where you're trying to make a point or make a claim, and you're building an ethos or a reputation, we've talked about ethos before this semester, and establish credibility, it's harmful if you are falling back on logical fallacies. At that point, it's basically like taking 1 step forward, building credibility, and then 2 steps backwards, damaging that credibility by using logical fallacies. So in order to create really strong, well-supported arguments, we want to make sure that we're using our sources effectively and not slipping into these logical fallacies. Okay? So once you've read through the readings, you're going to choose 3 logical fallacies that seem interesting to you in some way, and you'll write a response that does the following. You want to share the fallacy you've chosen. You want to explain briefly how the fallacy works so that I understand that you know what you've read. You're then going to share why people might fall into that logical fallacy, specifically when they're using an outside source, and I'll show you what I mean by that in the sample assignment here in a couple minutes. You're then going to share ideas as to how we could avoid the fallacy in our own thinking, research, and writing. Each entry should be no less than 250 words, or 750 words total for the assignment. And this is just the steps. It's basically what's stated up here, repeated for you. Same rubric as always. So let's take a look at the sample assignment. I went ahead and color-coded it for you this week to sort of illustrate the different parts of the assignment that I'm talking about so that you can see what each entry should look like for each logical fallacy. Basically, I've copied the prompt here, and then I've highlighted each of the requirements or each of the tasks that you're supposed to complete. And then in my sample paragraph, I've highlighted them, so it's color coordinated. This is where I'm sharing the fallacy. This is where I'm briefly explaining how the fallacy works. In my own words, I'm not copying Dr. Beeson's notes or the Lumen Learning notes. I'm sharing why people might fall victim to the fallacy when using outside sources. And then I'm sharing an idea or two of how to avoid the fallacy when I'm using sources in my final paper. Okay, so 250 words, you're going to do 3 of these. And of course, as always, you have your Dropbox here. So that will be this week's activity, introducing logical fallacies and learning how to use sources as effectively as possible. All right. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email as always. Otherwise, have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you in the week 11 announcements video.